Red Lotus Life. We are so excited that you are joining us for another week on boundaries. For those of you who don't know us, let me just introduce ourselves for just a second. I am Lori Kinsey. I'm an advanced spiral practitioner. I specialize in domestic violence and human trafficking. And I'm also the founder of Red Lotus Life. Back in 2018, I wanted to provide a space where people who were students of life from all over the world could come together and learn about alternative ways of healing. And so that is how actually Red Lotus Life began. But now, because there has been so much healing and everything that has been going on throughout the years, it now has a focus on domestic violence and how we can help those who have survived domestic violence, or even those who may not realize that they are in these situations, and they can just kind of learn a little bit more, because that was me. That was totally me back in the day.
Me too.
Yeah. This is Sara Elizabeth. She is my co-creator here with Red Lotus Life. She is a womb spiral practitioner and also a spiral practitioner. She specializes in inner child work, nonviolent communication, and embodiment. She has helped me so much become associated with my body, because that's one of the first things we do when we're not safe or we don't feel safe, is we disassociate and we leave the body. So she's amazing with getting you connected back into the body, especially around womb spiral. That's amazing too.
Thank you so much.
What's that?
I was just saying thank you so much.
Oh yeah. So much gratitude for you.
So much gratitude for you.
Yeah, she has been part of Red Lotus Life from the very beginning. She has been one of my soul sisters for a really long time. She heard the very first time that Red Lotus Life was even a thought, even a little tiny thought and just a seed, and she's watched it grow. So now together we co-create the Red Lotus Life membership, which is where we help support those with emotional clearing in creating a life that they love after abuse. So you can find out more about that with the link in the comments. But for today, we are going to be talking more about boundaries. This is kind of an extension from our boundary workshop that we did a few weeks ago. If you haven't seen that, go check it out. It's actually in the playlist. It'll be there free for the next little while we're extending even more, because we realized this is such an important topic, and not many people, a lot of people know about boundaries, but their perspective of a boundary is to set it for others so others don't cross it. But we are talking about boundaries in the sense of really what they're for is to know how you are going to respond when somebody does start to get close to those boundaries, and also how to communicate those, because a lot of times they're unspoken, right? A lot of times we don't share that somebody just crossed a boundary until they crossed it. So we really like to be proactive in this and really want to speak on that for the next couple of weeks. So today we're going to be talking about ways to communicate availability, which is huge when we're working on ourselves and we're starting to develop this self-awareness. This is huge. It's priceless. So I'm really excited for our discussion today. So Sara, did you have anything to add to that?
I think that the other thing that I want to add, yes, we are deepening from last week and also from our workshop. But these are ways that we can communicate our boundaries. And when we learn to properly communicate our boundaries, then we are creating safety for ourselves. We are creating a way for us to come back into our sovereignty and to prevent ourselves from being taken advantage of and from, neglecting ourselves.
Yeah, and I'm really excited about this conversation in particular, because I think a lot of times we're not even aware of our capacity, like what our availability is. So I'll just give quite an example because it happens to me quite often prior to, right? So when I didn't know what I was available for or what I had the capacity to hold, if somebody came to me with something, right? Like somebody came to me, a loved one or whatever, a child, my partner, whoever came to me and was like, really all of a sudden they emotionally throw up on me. And all of a sudden I'm like, I can't do this. Like I all this not excitement, but overwhelm and anxiety and everything starts to like boil up inside me. And then it comes out sideways, which is a whole domino effect because now that person doesn't feel heard, doesn't feel seen, feels as if I don't have enough time for them. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. And now there's another imprint of a trauma. And then walls kind of go up, right? Like their boundaries, they kind of start to go, okay, this is somebody I can't go to in that place. So I'm excited about this conversation today and to learn a little bit more about how to communicate availability on both ends, how to ask if somebody is available to hear and see and all those things. And then also the opposite effect, right? The opposite perspective of when to be able to communicate when you have the availability to hold space for someone else. So,
yeah, I love it. It's a great conversation.
Yeah. Are you ready for me to share my screen?
I am.
Okay. Okay, where did it go? There it is. All right, can you see that okay?
I can. Perfect.
Awesome.
But if you could just scroll up just a little bit more so I can see the entire text box. Yeah, perfect. Okay, so we are deepening our conversation around the different types of energy and or not different types of energy, but the different types of boundaries that we have already previously discussed. So today we're starting again with emotional energy and how to communicate availability around emotional energy. So I just have here, I'm sorry you're having a hard time, but I don't have the emotional capacity to hold space right now. Can you just check back with me later? So for me, that's just a really simple but kind way to be able to express a boundary around emotional energy. And that comes up so often, so much more often. And I feel like that was a place for me where, like you were saying before, we don't even realize that we are or are not available until we start to reflect upon these things and then practice, really put it into practice.
Yeah, it really, when we start doing this work on a deeper level and a more advanced level, you really do start to have that consideration for others because you have that self-awareness. So this took me a few years to practice. I'm glad that you brought that up about practicing, because it took me a few years to even have the self-awareness of what am I available for right now and being able to communicate that. And then also, because when you're able to do this, so even this right here, this is really great. Because if, let's say, my teen at the time would come up to me and say, hey, and just emotionally throw up on me and tell me all the things. When I'm able to say that, I kind of stop for a minute and say, hey, I don't have time right now because of XYZ, but can I come back around to you in a half an hour? Can I come back to you and, let me just finish this up and then I can give you all the time in the world, right? So even just having that emotional energy, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And another way that I've found to be really great to express that boundary is to say, I don't currently have the bandwidth. Or if you're the other party, then you might say, do you have the bandwidth right now? Yeah. And so this was even something that just showed up for me in my personal life and space just before we got ready to record. As parents, these things come up.
Yeah, it's true. It really is true. And so I know that I just kept speaking on time, but I love that part about the emotional bandwidth, right? Because a lot of times we just don't have that Or even it's like, hey, I need to just step outside for a minute. Can I come back inside in a minute and then we can sit down and have this conversation? Or can I just, I love what you just said. So it's really shows the self-awareness with what we have available, and then also that consideration of others. This is something actually I'd like to speak on with the other perspective is I will actually say that. So if I know that I need emotional support, I will ask whoever it is that I've gone to, and I'll say, hey, I could really, I really need to talk to somebody right now about something. Can you help me process? Are you available for that right now? And what has happened, which is awesome, is that people will tell me, like people will say, yeah, give me a call right now. Let's talk. I have time. I have the space. And then other times people will say this exact same thing to me because I've been on that other end where if somebody says, or they just ghost you, let's say you text somebody and then they just ghost you. And then again, don't feel witnessed, don't feel heard. All of a sudden the walls start to build and go, okay, well, that person doesn't care about me when I'm in a time of need. But if that communication is there, then those walls aren't built up.
Right. Right. And also just not being afraid to regularly reiterate, because when we are in this process, and especially in partnerships or relationships, when we do start to implement, we have to reiterate in order to remind that, hey, we are now establishing this boundary around our emotional energy or whatever that boundary might be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it works out really well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, ready for the next one?
I am. Okay, so the boundary around how to communicate our time. So just for an example, I can only stay for X amount of time, or if you will be late, please notify me ahead of time. These have been really big for me, especially in past relationships where my time was actually never acknowledged. Basically, my time was spent doing how do I want to word this? At some point, it was as if I didn't have any control over my own schedule. So it became really, really important for me to be able to establish boundaries around time, especially as I was beginning to step into my own business and create my own business. And then, I had regular appointments and regular clients and that type of thing. And so I had to start getting really, really strict with my time, or the boundary around my time. I don't want to say necessarily strict, but just really firm and say, at this period of time, I will be working. Or I have a call, or I have a business meeting, in order to start to reiterate and drive that home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really like this one too, because I was the same in every relationship where abuse or anything like that was involved in. There was zero acknowledgement of my time. My time didn't matter. My schedule didn't matter. I really just had to figure things out, which I really like that first sentence of how you say just saying it right out front, right? Just starting out with that and saying, I can only stay for this amount of time. This is how much time I have, and just communicating that. And then I really like the other one too, because every single time I was in a relationship like this, they could have all the time in the world and they were consistently late. Again, not acknowledging my time, right? Not acknowledging my time. So I love even saying that and communicating that, because if you start out in these relationships, this is one of the things that we really work on and focus on in Red Lotus Life, is that when we communicate our boundaries ahead of time and like in the very beginning of a relationship, when one is starting to develop, then a lot of this can be avoided. because you're going to start seeing those red flags, right? So if you were to say, hey, if you're going to be late, please let me know, or something like that, and then they get upset, red flag. You want to be with somebody who acknowledges your time and values your time just as much as they value yours.
Yes, that is so huge. Another thing that I used to find myself, sort of my boundaries around time were definitely not being upheld. I might say, okay, yes, I'd like to go to dinner, but afterwards I need to go back home. And then I would find myself running errands all over town hours later, and my time was again not being respected. So, I mean, there's so many different examples of how this can show up.
Yeah. I like this also because time is part of our precious resources.
Yeah.
And we can't ever get our time back. So when that is a huge red flag when and it doesn't matter what kind of relationship, it doesn't matter if it's workplace, if it's, intimate, and we focus on intimate relationships, but it really doesn't matter. You can just look at all of your relationships and the people that you spend time with. And if they aren't respecting that time, that's a big one. And you can find the people in your life that will acknowledge and respect your time.
Yes.
Okay, next one.
Yeah, moving on to personal space. I feel uncomfortable. This is the way you can communicate it. I feel uncomfortable or unsafe when you do that, XYZ, whatever that thing is that is making you uncomfortable. And if you cannot respect my space, then I will have to leave. And that can even look like whatever the boundary is that any two people have communicated to one another. It may not just be leaving. It might be then I'm going to step outside, or I'm going to, there's so many different things. So I'm just saying that it is the choice of the person who is setting the boundary.
Mm-hmm. So I have been in extreme circumstances and extreme situations. And this was something when we were preparing for this that I wish I would have known how to communicate, because I am somebody who's very nice. I'm a nice person. And so when I was, this is the type of stuff that actually happens with teens. When I was thinking back at going, gosh, when was the first time that I actually felt this way in an intimate relationship? And it was in my teen years, right? My adolescent years, when I first began to start dating. And I remember being so timid about it that even though I was saying no, or I was uncomfortable or something like that, it didn't matter to the other person, because I wasn't backing it, if that makes any sense. So my words, my language, and everything that I was saying wasn't necessarily maybe
like your energy wasn't backing it.
Yeah, exactly. My energy wasn't backing it. And so now, let's say I can rewind, right? Now that I know more about this and how to actually back this up, this is something that I would immediately now in this, if I was ever in a situation, I would immediately say this, and then I would immediately follow through, because that was another thing that even going into, because it's a pattern, right? It's a pattern. What we end up doing in the beginning is how we end up, and once we're in adulthood, until we start breaking these patterns. And I can't tell you how many times, even after I've left a relationship, but I would, sometimes you're still friends with those people, or you're co-parenting with the people, or whatever it is. You might have a relationship in one way or another. And I remember even then being in these situations, and they would go from 0 to 100 so fast. And I would say this over and over again, but did I actually follow through on the first time? No, I didn't. And so now it's like, oh yeah, I 100% enforce these boundaries. I communicate them, and then I leave. I follow through on what I say is going to happen if it doesn't stop. And that has actually broken the pattern. That's broken the cycle. It's broken the pattern. because we have that choice. But if you're not following through, you're not in integrity with your boundaries and what you're communicating. So how do they know?
Right. It almost goes back to that saying that goes, we teach people how to treat us. And so when we do, when we implement those boundaries and communicate those boundaries immediately, then we never find ourselves slipping out of our sovereignty, or neglecting ourselves, or finding us in situations that are red flags, or that, we've already dissolved the boundaries.
Yeah. And again, this is practice, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's practice, and it's also self-awareness. Again, of going, oh, I just said this, so now I need to follow through.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's always like, it's just a constant thing. And when we're in the moment and we're in, like, for me, it would be extreme situations. When you're in it, you kind of lose that thought pattern. So it does take practice, and it's having that strong spine, right? Having the strong spine and backing that and doing it from a place of sovereignty. Because if we do this, it's actually going to eliminate so many of these situations that we can find ourselves in.
Yes. And I love that you keep coming back to practice and implementation. And what it brings to mind is pattern interruption, especially when we are already in it and we haven't been able to establish those boundaries, previously. When we're in it, when we're really in it and we need to establish the boundaries, it literally is pattern interruption.
Mm-hmm.
That was a huge thing that I practiced.
Mm-hmm. And then what that does, if we want to start going into neurology and everything else, what that does is that's now breaking that neural pathway and creating a new one, not only for you, but also who you're interacting with. Because all of a sudden they go, oh, okay, I can't do this anymore. Because that is one thing that does happen in these types of relationships, is they will continue to keep doing it. They're going to continue to keep pushing to see what happens. Right. And then when all of a sudden they're like, oh, okay, they really meant it. That's when they start to treat you differently.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. So good.
Yeah. Okay. Next one.
Yes. Okay. How to communicate availability around morals and ethics. It's really easy to say something like, I hear you and I'm hearing that we don't agree. I respect your opinion. Can we just agree to disagree? And this is one that I use often in many different conversations, because we are all different. We have different backgrounds. We come from different places with different life experiences, and we're not always going to agree. So I really love this one. Just, can we agree to disagree?
Mm-hmm. I like this one too, because it actually very naturally ends a disagreement and it solves it. It just kind of dissipates it. And then when you're able to wrap it up and move on. I also like this one because it also tells you what you are tolerant of, like your tolerance levels, I guess. Mm-hmm. Because this will show somebody's morals, values, and ethics right away. And then you can, tolerance is actually one of my gene keys. And so I'm very tolerance actually is a shadow in one of my gene keys. And so I work with that quite a bit because it's, I feel our shadows are a gift. So I'll work with it a lot because it will actually tell me, okay, what is my tolerance level right now? Am I tolerant of this viewpoint and what's happening right now? And do I want, it shows me, is this a relationship that I do want to cultivate and that I want to be in? Or is this something that I'm like, oh, nope. I am intolerant of this, and no, this is not something that I want to pursue further. So I love this one right here.
Yeah, especially when we're feeling into relationship dynamics, is this even a person? If we don't agree, yes, let's agree to disagree, but is there still anything of value and integrity around the relationship? as far as moving forward, or are we going to agree to meet each other where we are? In a lot of situations, that's great. And then sometimes the intolerance may be real, as far as like what you're willing to surround yourself with, as far as morals and ethics are concerned. I feel like there was something else that I wanted to add here, but I'm not recalling it right now. So
maybe it'll come back, because there's something else that just dropped in for me actually. And I said, this also shows our availability again.
Yeah.
Right? It shows our availability, since this is all about communicating our ways of availability. This right here is going to show you what you're available for and what you aren't. It's also going to show you where you are maybe focusing on some things that aren't in your best, like aren't in your highest and best good, right? Aren't in your best interest. So.
Oh, okay. I remember now what it was. You were speaking about gene keys, and that reminded me of my shadows of two specific gene keys. I love that we've brought the gene keys into this conversation, especially for anybody who is new to it or who is curious about it. We go so much deeper around gene keys in the membership group. But mine specifically around dissatisfaction comes up around morals and ethics, and also comes up with judgment. So the shadow of judgment. So those are fun. I do believe that they are the gift, or that they are a huge gift for us, because when we're able to navigate the shadows, then we are able to express the actual gift of each gene key so much more clearly and lightly, and with integrity.
Yeah. Oh, we both love the gene keys.
Yeah. It's good stuff.
Okay. Are we done with this
Yes.
infographic? Okay, cool. Okay, that was awesome. I absolutely love that. It takes practice, right? It takes practice, but what this does is it actually it stops so much of what's going on. It literally starts to break the pattern that you found yourself over and over, like just repeating over and over and over again. If you are asking yourself the question of how do I keep continuing ending up in relationships like this right here is one of the ways that you can actually stop that whenever you're communicating what you're available for and what you're not.
Yes, and actually, you would be really, really surprised. And it does take practice. And sometimes it takes very, very extended periods of time. But even some of the toughest situations, you'll begin to see shifts.
Yeah.
That has been my personal experience, is that it does create a level of self-awareness, not only for yourself, but in whomever you are communicating with. And eventually, it does shift. At least to some degree, with self-awareness, to some degree.
Yeah, it 100% does. This is another topic for another day.
For sure.
But when we are dealing with narcissists, it also doesn't feed them, right? If you're not feeding that narcissist the energy that they are looking for, and you're starting to communicate these boundaries, and then you're following through and you're practicing, you're literally showing, like, you can't treat me this way, or you can treat me this way. Which way is it going to be? They will actually lose interest.
Yep.
They will lose interest, and all of a sudden it's like, boom, they've moved on to the next thing. And you're like, hallelujah, my life feels really good right now. Okay, well, was there anything else that you wanted to add before we wrap up?
I don't think so. Just as usual, please feel free to like, comment, and share, join the conversation, and also check out our membership group in the comment, or the link is in the comments.
Yes. Thank you so much for sharing your time, your energy with us today. We enjoy the conversation. So if this is something that you enjoyed, yes, please like, share, comment below. If there's somebody you know that could actually benefit from this, please share this with them as well. And if you're interested in the Red Lotus Life Group, yes, please join us. It's with the link below. We dive deeper into all the things. We do emotional clearing. We dive deeper into gene keys, human
Human
design,
design.
all kinds of things. So, yep, it's in the link below. And we will see you next time. Have an amazing day.
Bye.
Bye.
And live your life today.